Hi, everyone. It's Stephanie with the Patient Story, and I am so excited to introduce our guest today, Kimberly O'Connor, who's here to share her lymphoma story. So, Kimberly, first, thank you for spending the time with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, I mean, I saw your story with marginal zone lymphoma. Not that common, to see the stories out there. And so I was really excited to be able to connect with you so we could get that going. But before we begin, I do like to ask people to talk a little bit about themselves outside of the cancer context so we know more about Kimberly, right? Because you're way more than the diagnosis. So what would you like
Right.
people to know about you?
Oh, I'm pregnant. I'm 32 weeks pregnant as of right now. So due date is April 25th. So it's getting closer and closer. First kid. It's a boy. Other than that, um, I come from a great family. Filipino by heritage. Um, by my last name, my husband is Irish. um, I mean, other than that, that's pretty much it. I'm a pretty easygoing person.
Yeah.
Um, we come from huge families. Uh,
And you're a
and then,
big soccer fan, is that right?
yeah, big soccer fan. We are season ticket holders of New York Red Bulls, so we watch them, and then we watch the USL, which is like the minor league team over at Montclair State. So we're huge fans, and now we're also fans of Sky Blue FC, which also play at the same arena. So
Oh, wow.
we're just big sports fans
Yeah,
everywhere.
no, I love that, and your little boy will grow up in a big sports family, so
Oh yeah, that's a given.
thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. It helps to just, set the scene. And so, yeah, let's dive right in. I know, Kimberly, you were
Sure.
35, very young, when this all happened. So
Mhm.
what were the signs for you that made you think, "Okay, something's up, I need to figure this out?"
It nothing really. That was the weird part. I had my yearly physical, and my doctor was asking me, "Oh, isn't everything all right? Anything weird?" And everything was fine. She drew the blood like she normally does. She gave me my flu shot like she normally does. And then probably a week or two later, I had a really bad nosebleed, and I used to get them a lot when I was a kid. So and then I thought I grew out of it because I didn't really have them anymore. But then this one was pretty bad. It lasted like 45 minutes to an hour. So it was bad. And that was before I got the word from my doctor to see a hematologist. Maybe I don't really remember the timeline of it all, but maybe she did at that point already. I don't remember. But um, no, I think now now that I think about it, she did. So I had my blood results, but I didn't really know how to read them.
Right, from
I
the
just knew that
physical
I
that you
needed,
had. Yeah.
yeah, from the physical. I just knew that I needed to see a hematologist. And then, of course, when you look up to who to see, there's also slash oncologist next to their name. So I was just like, this isn't good. So that was the only sign, I guess.
See, yeah.
So um, I went to see the hematologist who was in like not far from our house. Um, and he just did the same thing. He goes, "It does look a little weird. I want to dig a little deeper, so let's just order more blood tests." And I'm like, "All right, fine." Came back probably a week after that, and he said that it um, still looked weird, and he didn't like the way it looked. So I was like, "Oh, this is getting better and better." um, and then he said, pretty much, he wants to order a bone marrow biopsy.
And
And
you're like,
that's
"What?" Did you even know what that was at that time when he
I
said it?
did.
You did.
Well, I mean, you hear it and you automatically think of cancer. So that's what I thought.
Yeah, and so you got the bone marrow biopsy done. Was it that day? On the timeline, it looks like you got it. I mean, he was
Yeah,
like, "Let's do it," and then
it
it
was that
actually.
day.
Okay.
I came in that morning, and then he goes, If you have time today, I can check my schedule and we can get it done today. And I'm like, okay, I might as well, because I worked a half hour away from the office. So I didn't want to go to the office,
Come
go
back.
back to the doctor,
Yeah.
go back to the office again. So I was just like, yeah, I guess I'll just hang out
And get it
and
over
get it
with.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my husband, he was working about an hour away south at the time. So I called him up and he booked it an hour north to the office.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that he was able to make it. Can you describe the bone marrow biopsy, just what you were going through for people who, are going to go through one themselves?
It was weird. I was awake for the whole thing, which I wasn't expecting, to be honest. I don't know what I was expecting. Um, all I knew was that it was invasive. Kind of invasive, I guess you could say. So they laid me on my stomach and took they like numbed my hip bone from the back, and they they numbed the skin first, and then they numbed the bone, and then they numbed the inside of the bone, I think. But and then they extracted the marrow from my hip bone. Um, it was just a weird sensation. Like all I felt was like tapping, and I knew things were moving. I just felt pressure and tapping, and my husband all the while was watching this whole thing next to me. And he I like when we were done, they just kind of let me lay down on my back so the pressure would stop the bleeding on my hip. And so when the doctor left, my husband and I were left in the room, and I was like, was it gross? I go, did it look gross? He goes, yeah, it was pretty gross. He goes, all I saw was just like him like screwing something and like
Oh,
digging and the extraction. He
yeah.
goes,
So kind of good that you didn't see it while it was happening, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah. He goes, I really wanted to take a video, but being a lawyer, I don't know if that was right. So I just left it alone, and I just figured I'd tell you about it. So I mean
yeah.
that was it. I mean, it
Okay.
wasn't like there was some pain, but once I did say there was pain, it went away right away. So
Okay. It was just mostly a weird sensation, right?
it
Uncomfortable.
was,
Could feel.
it was. And
Could
my
feel
doctor,
something.
he was even asking during that time, he goes, okay, now I'm taking the marrow sample. Let me know how it feels. And I was like, it just feels weird. There's
Yeah.
nothing to describe it other than weird.
Right. No, and I remember mine too. I tried to transport myself somewhere else, in that time too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funky feeling. Um, so you got this biopsy done, and then I see in the timeline that you got the results about a week later.
Yeah.
Can you recall that day? Was it a phone call? Did they ask you to go to the doctor's office? What was that like?
Um, we made the appointment for us to come back. So not only was it me and my husband, it was my parents, my mother-in-law, and my aunt, who who was a retired nurse in Jersey City. So she was familiar with the cancer stuff too, because my father-in-law passed away from cancer. So the six of us were in this room with my hematologist and his nurse giving us the news that I had cancer. I mean, the night before, my husband and I kind of prepped ourselves for the worst case scenario. So when he gave us the news that that I had cancer and that it would take about 6 months of chemo, and that, a normal life is possible after that, we were pretty much okay, but not everyone else in the room, because we kind of prepped ourselves for the worst. And when it wasn't the worst, we were actually relieved. So even though it was cancer and it sucked, it wasn't it wasn't the worst case scenario, which was good.
Okay, so you took it in stride, and you and your husband had talked about it, tried to mentally prepare yourselves for what might come out of your doctor's mouth.
Yeah.
So I guess you were kind of able to process the different scenarios beforehand. I like to ask people too, just in terms of any guidance for how to break the news. I mean, you had family in there with you, so that's something that's a little different. So they were there. But for other people, like, did you decide to start telling people at that time? I know you knew it was non-Hodgkin's, you didn't know subtype yet. So were you waiting for more
Yeah.
answers until you would take that step?
We knew it was non-Hodgkin's from the start. I think my hematologist thought it was one type, but then when the second opinion came back, they really found out it was marginal zone. So, um, we just basically told people it was non-Hodgkin's. We just didn't really know what type yet. But we were telling people. We told my family first because they were further. So like, or they weren't really. I couldn't get to them fast enough, I guess. So it was easier to call them and tell them on the phone. That was tough. Uh, but when it came to my husband's side of the family, um, my aunt who was there, she was the one on the horn basically telling everybody, which was fine. I didn't really want to be the bearer of bad news at that time either. So, um,
Is
but
that advice you'd have for other people in terms of, you have a lot on your plate, you're dealing with the diagnosis. Was it helpful just having someone on the horn and kind of taking care of all that?
it was because then I didn't have to repeat myself like thousands of times and saying it over and over again. Um, because you already knew what's happening. So it's just a matter of fact of the more you say it, I guess the more real it is, but
Right.
it's
Right.
real already.
Right. For you especially. And then you mentioned second opinion, which was good because it led to the more specific diagnosis
Right.
of marginal zone lymphoma. Can you tell us about how you decided to get the second opinion, and then just how your doctor was able to describe what marginal zone lymphoma is, you know?
Yeah. Well, he told us that he recommended that we get a second opinion. And he recommended either Slow Memorial Sloan Kettering or Rutgers Cancer Institute. And both were fine. So we didn't really have a preference. I asked my primary doctor what she her opinion on it, and she said Rutgers would probably be the best bet because they're more even though Sloan Kettering is cancer focused, so is Rutgers Institute, just because they just have this huge building and everything's taken care of right then and there. So we ended up going to Rutgers. And that pretty much took all day. Thankfully, I didn't have the only thing I had to go through were more blood tests, so that was fine. Other than that, um,
Eh,
it was just a consultation with their doctor at the time.
Yeah. And
I
is
mean, yeah, with their cancer with their oncologist,
and I see that it took
and
a
that was
few
pretty much
days.
it. I mean, I got the Yeah, I think it was either a week or less than a week. I remember getting a call from my hematologist. I was out the door heading to work, and then he called me with the official subtype. Um, and so I was half paying attention until like he told me, "Okay, what are you going to tell your husband when I told you?" And I was like, "Oh, um." I was
How
like, "Let me head back into the house and let me write this down."
Yeah, yeah, and what did he say, how did he describe overall marginal zone lymphoma as a subtype, like, in terms of what that meant for you?
Um, it didn't I mean, I guess it wasn't any different as to what treatment was gonna be, so that didn't change. The only thing that, changed was just the name that they called it. I remember when we first, talked about the results that the I don't remember what the full name of it was, but the abbreviation was LPL, I think. Um, and then we were and then we got the official marginal zone lymphoma. I'm so sorry that the phone's ringing. Hold on one second. Sorry about that.
No problem. Hey, it's COVID time. Everything
Yeah.
happens.
So then we got the official word. It was marginal zone lymphoma, and he said treatment was pretty much going to be the same. 6 months of chemo for once a month for 6 months. And the only thing that was really different was just the classification of it. So nothing really on my end needed to be done.
Okay.
Just how they classified it is all.
Okay. Sounds good. Just a couple more questions before we move on to the next segment.
Yes, sure.
How did you deal with any sort of scan anxiety or anxiety of waiting for results during this time? And if so, do you have any guidance for other people on how to manage it?
I mean, the only scan I had that I can was my PET scan, and that was like you had to drink the stuff beforehand and like sit still, and I was sitting still's not great with me, especially when I know I have to sit still. But that was the only thing that I had to go through. I mean,
Can you
just
actually finish describing the PET scan since you talked about that? So,
yeah, sure.
did you get the contrast dye
I
injected?
did. I did get the contrast. The first scan was with the contrast. Um, an old coworker of mine said she went through this a PET scan also for a different reason, and she saw the contrast that I had to drink, and she's like, make sure, she's like, if you could drink it cold, it'll go down easier. But I think I saw on the label that I wasn't allowed to drink it cold, so I was like, I'm just gonna have to tough it out. um, which I did. Thankfully, I only had to drink one and not two that the doctor's office gave me, so that was good. Um, just yeah, I guess just sitting still for the whole thing. Like when I know I have to sit still, it's not that great. So like of course everything starts to itch, and like you're trying to think of other things, but then like you want to wiggle your toe or something like that, or like raise your eyebrow and you're not allowed to. But other than that, I mean, like you think it's longer than it's supposed to be, but it's really like faster than you think it
Yeah, it
is.
just feels long, right?
Yeah,
You
it just
having to,
feels super long. But I mean, I didn't know what to expect from that because I never had a PET scan before. So when my doctor showed me the results, it was just like, he was just like, yeah, it's just looking for hot spots in your body. And I was like, oh, okay. So he kind of like went through the results with me, and he went from like pretty much from my head, to my feet. And he goes, yeah, that's your brain. That'll show up. That's your heart. Of course, that'll show up. And he goes, we're looking for like things that are out of the ordinary. So your major organs, like they're normal. They're supposed to, show up. He goes, but other than that, he goes, um, they caught it so early that it didn't really show anywhere. It just showed up in my blood tests.
okay.
So we were really thankful for that. So when we asked like what stage I was in, he technically said, he goes, well, there really isn't one where you're at. He goes, you're practically at 0. So we caught it like you're one of the rare ones. Granted, marginal zone lymphoma is rare to begin with,
Right.
considering he goes, considering it affects elderly men more than anybody. And I'm like, oh, all right, neither one of those are me. So
Right. So why not go even more rare? 'Cause,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, why not
Okay.
even do more? So
Okay, well, thank you
yeah,
for sharing that. I mean, so it was really early. That's the good news.
yeah,
I know that the first thing you did was actually you then went to see a fertility doctor, but we're actually going to save the fertility journey for the last segment of the video, so
okay,
people can tune in into the third clip for that because we're going to really dive into what your experience was. But yeah, okay. So now we're going to shift over to the second video, which will be about your treatment, which is the chemo side effects and how you got through that. So just stick around.
okay.